Within the time of World War II, women finally had the chance to play a vital role in assisting the military. They became known as the WASPs, or the Women Airforce Service Pilots. After their triumph of being included in the war effort and nearing military equality, tragedy struck. As with the end of war in sight, a common perception was that women were no longer needed or wanted and would not be a useful asset going into the future, and men would reclaim flying jobs. In 1940, Nancy Love petitioned to Lieutenant Colonel Robert Olds and General Henry Arnold that a small crew of experienced women could ferry planes and be beneficial towards the Army as a women's flying unit. Olds supported Love's proposal, but General Arnold rejected the idea. In the summer of 1941, Jackie Cochran had a similar idea. She had found 3,000 women who had pilot's licenses and drafted a program for flyers to fly non-combat missions and to assemble a school for those less experienced. In like manner, General Arnold turned her down because there were enough male pilots to do those undertakings, but he guaranteed her that if a women's unit was ever instituted, she would be placed in charge.
The idea when it was put to the Army Air Corps General Arnold, he thought, a wisp of a girl flying one of these bombers, they don't have the strength.
Shortly after the catastrophic events of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the United States was found unprepared for war and the need for pilots was growing. Fortunately for the WASPs, there was a new colonel, William Tunner, who had not heard of the propositions and gladly agreed to start an organization. In September of 1942, the Women's Flying Training Detachment, or WFTDs, was assembled. When Jackie heard of the news, she met with General Arnold. He saw the promise in the WFTD and set aside his prejudice and fashioned a compromise. Nancy's squadron would start as well as Jackie's training program. Nancy's would be called Women's Auxiliary Flying Squadron, or WAFs. Both organizations were running by the end of 1942. Unfortunately, leading into 1943, the WAFs had fewer resources and supplies than the WFTD, such as no uniforms, no life insurance, and no medical vehicles, which ultimately led to the merger of the two organizations in July 1943, forming the WASPs, or Women Airforce Service Pilots. The women that were associated with the WASPs made history. They were triumphant in being the first U.S. women to fly military aircrafts. Along with that, they were looked upon as essentially equal to men. They trained in Avengerfield, Texas, and learned to fly every military plane and assisted in training soldiers for war.
These men were very afraid to fly the B-29. You can't blame the men. It had crashed in Seattle and killed 19 people in a meatpacking plant here. It killed the best test pilot, Eddie Allen, that Boeing had.
Pilot Paul Tibbets, who would eventually fly the B-29 Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, asked two WASPs to learn how to fly the B-29 bomber, to show the men how it's done.
He sent the two women around the country to fly into the bases where the men were being trained to fly the B-29, to show them how easy it was, to almost shame them into it.
News of the WASPs began spreading, and soon newspapers and magazines were published telling the public of their achievements. Thousands upon thousands of women wanted to join this new uprising. The WASP organization was a major factor in the women's rights movement, as more and more women were rising to the occasion and abolishing stereotypical standards. The WASPs have completed their mission. Their job has been successful, but as is usual in war, it has been without cost. 38 WASPs have died while helping their country move toward the moment of final victory. The Air Force will long remember their service and their final sacrifice. So on this last graduation day, I salute you and all WASP. We of the AAF are proud of you. We will never forget our debt to you. As General Arnold promised to never forget the WASPs and their service to the country, he sadly could not keep it. On December 20th, 1944, the WASPs were tragically disbanded. When members of the WASP returned home, there were secrets they could not share due to the fact that men did not want to display women doing manly work, as that children, brothers, and husbands may view them as masculine.
My kids didn't know anything about this. No one knew anything. I never talked about it. There were no WASPs in Rochester.
Along with that, 38 women perished and were not granted any military honor. Pilot was not legally a military job for women, therefore a deceased WASP was sent home at the family's and WASP expense. Military honors or note of heroism, such as displaying a service flag, allowing a flag to be placed on the casket, or presenting a gold star to the family, was prohibited.
We lost 38 girls. Their families got no compensation at all. There were no honors. They would not allow those families to put the gold star in the window, which other families could do who lost males in the war. But at that point, of course, we were not commissioned. We had been told when we went that first day into Avenger Field, we all had to raise our right hands and take the oath that every military officer takes, because they expected us to be militarized.
It was an unfortunate experience for the families to have their daughter not being able to be recognized as a contributor to the war effort. Suspected sabotage because the men did not like the women in the planes, and they would either lose screws and not put something back together properly. There was suggested sugar in the tank, put in the gas tank of one of the airplanes that crashed.
The first tragic WASP death was Cornelia Fort. Male pilots were distrustful and felt women did not warrant the right to fly, which evidently caused Cornelia's death. While Cornelia was on a ferrying flight, a male-piloted plane struck her own, causing it to diverge and crash. Cornelia died immediately upon impact. Hats were sent around the camp to collect enough to send her body back to her family.
There had been a mid-air collision. We were on our way into the landing, and he looked up ahead and he says, "Oh, Jesus." And it was two planes coming together, and they hit head-on. Crashed right in front of us.
In total, there were 1,102 WASPs, 12,650 aircrafts delivered, and over 60 million miles flown. About 30 years later, in 1977, a bill was petitioned to identify WASPs as members of the military and to be treated as such. On November 23, 1977, Jimmy Carter signed the bill, and many WASPs were granted honorable discharges. 1977 became known as the Year of the WASP. Yet, true recognition was established in 2009 when former President Obama signed a bill that awarded the WASP a Congressional Gold Medal.
And simply put, the outstanding success that America achieved in the era during World War II would not have been possible without the Women Airforce Service Pilots.
I believe this is the day that when the people of America will no longer hesitate in answering the question, do you know who the WASP were?
I think the WASP just kind of paved the way for women in maintenance careers and in sort of non-typical careers for women. So before that, it was no women flew in the military or probably worked as mechanics in the military or any of that stuff. And so through them and their experiences, paved the way for me to be able to do what I do as a mechanic and for women pilots to be able to fly as a career.